Staind used to be one of the biggest bands around back in the day. They made a name for themselves around the turn of the 21st century, selling millions of records and winning over the hearts of fans with their relatable, angsty music. These days, people tend to make fun of them for being overly dramatic, but there is no doubt that Staind hit the mark for many during their heyday. The group will be playing some reunion shows later this year, and so I thought it would be a good time to take a little look back on their discography. Now, usually when you think of Staind albums, their first two records are considered their early work, with Dysfunction in particular being a fan favorite. After that, Break the Cycle was their big mainstream breakthrough. 14 Shades of Grey was a continuation of Break the Cycle, although not quite as good. Chapter 5 is when most people started to get tired of Staind, and their self-titled and final album is seen as a good return to form, with the band revisiting some of their old heavier roots. However, the record was mostly overshadowed by the turmoil within the group at the time, as seen on the making of documentary that can be found on YouTube. I really recommend it for anyone that's interested. But there is actually one more album in the Staind discography, a record that I rarely see get mentioned at all. In between Chapter 5 and self-titled, Staind released their 6th studio album in 2008, called The Illusion of Progress. Every time I stumble upon this record, I keep finding myself surprised as I repeatedly forget about its existence. But why is this the case? How come this one album just fell into obscurity? It debuted at number 3 on the Billboard and had a number 1 single on the alternative chart, yet still it just sorta went under the radar. Well, over a decade after its release, I think it's a good time to take a look back and analyze the forgotten Staind album. Let's get started. Before we even get into the music here, let's get the obvious things out of the way. Like I mentioned before, the band's previous record, Chapter 5, was around the point where people started to get tired of Staind. It seemed like the band's music started to blend more and more together since the release of Break the Cycle, without them ever really experimenting with their formula. It wasn't until their self-titled 2011 record that the band switched things up a bit, releasing their heaviest music in over 10 years. So already the album is starting off the back foot. Around 2008, the interest in Staind was at an all-time low, and many people who were once fans started to move on to different artists. With this in mind, it's no wonder that this was the first Staind album since their debut to not get any certification from the RIAA. And to be honest, you can't really put the entire blame on Staind, as the entire nu metal / post-grunge movement started to die off around this time. Looking at the album itself, the cover doesn't even use the trademark Staind logo, opting for a pretty generic font instead. It's like it's asking to be left out at the dinner table. Anyway, I think it's about time we get into the actual music. The album starts off with one of the singles, This Is It, and right off the bat we encounter a problem. I'm not saying this is a terrible song, however it really is not a good album opener. It doesn't have much energy, the writing is pretty bland, and overall it's just a song that's sorta there. You know, it's a bad sign when an album opens up with filler, especially when that filler is one of the singles. This was chosen as one of the tracks to represent the album, to make people want to buy it. And if it sounds like I'm being harsh, I'm really not. Staind have pulled off great album openers in the past. I mean, just compare this to this. Aaron Lewis's delivery leaves much to be desired here as well. The chorus is meant to be grand and inspiring, but Aaron just sounds a bit tired to me. Also, the transition from verse to chorus really lacks punch. Sure, it's seamless, but once again, it pales in comparison with stuff the band has done before. Let's compare the transition into the chorus with Open Your Eyes.
An alleyway dead, a little girl
transition there feels natural but grabs the listener's attention at the same time. On This Is It really doesn't do anything. So already we are off to a pretty poor start. I'm gonna say it again, this is not a bad song, but I would not praise it for anything either. If anything, it sounds like Stained light, because the band has pulled off this exact sound much better before. Anyhow, let's move on to the second track, The Way I Am.
Not very good at remembering things that you say. I'm not very good at pursuing redemption.
I'm starting to notice a pattern on this album. So far, musically, this record has been really uninspired. On this song in particular, it feels like all of the melody is coming from Aaron's singing. The instruments play a reduced role. Mike Mushok is one of my favorite guitarists, yet he really doesn't get to shine much on this record. I know Aaron Lewis is a capable songwriter, but you can't let the music sit back and use it as a space to talk about every emotion you've ever felt. This album feels like that, with everything else just being background noise. I mean, just listen to a song like For You from Break the Cycle.
To my mother, to my father, it's your son or it's your daughter.
That guitar riff is so nasty, and it pumps up the listener every time, and mixed with a great performance from Aaron Lewis, it's like a drug for the ears. I really don't understand why the rest of the band doesn't get their chance to shine on this album. Who knows, it could have been its saving grace. And believe my shock when I discovered that the band claimed this was their, quote, most musical CD. What? There is a joke about Stained that all of their lyrics are basically everything an edgy teenager writes in his notebook during class. And on this album, that's really noticeable. When the music surrounding the lyrics isn't anything special, you're bound to zone in on the songwriting, which on this record is melodramatic as all hell, even for Stained. Aaron Lewis has said himself that at one point writing lyrics for Stained became difficult because he felt like he had already written about everything there was to write about. On this album in particular, it's very noticeable, but not excusable. It doesn't help that this album frequently makes use of the stretch out every single word for as long as possible and sing everything super slowly method. Oh god. But anyhow, the next song coming up should probably be better. It was the most successful single from this record and got to number 1 on the alternative chart. Let's take a look at the song Believe.
In the dreams that I live through, believe in me. I know you've waited for so long.
What can I say? It's a Stained song, and it's about as basic as a Stained song gets. I do appreciate the inspiring lyrics about standing up for yourself and chasing your dreams, but this really is nothing new for the band. Aaron Lewis once again just sounds kinda off. I wouldn't say bored, but definitely uninspired. The music itself is again pretty forgettable, but believe it or not, this is probably the highlight from The Illusion of Progress. I honestly don't even know how this song got to number 1. It's okay, I mean I could even go as far as to call it good, but was this really the best the alternative chart had to offer at the time? I mean, this song once again feels like something that Stained themselves have done better before, and that is the case with this entire record. The album's title really does fit here, The Illusion of Progress, as the band really does not make any progress. Honestly, now that we've heard the first 3 songs on this 13-track album, we have basically heard all that this record has to offer. I'm not kidding. If you were just casually listening to this album, you'd be forgiven to think that it's all just one super long song. The tracks eventually start to blend together in a very unpleasant way, and at one point, your brain just goes numb and you forget you're even listening to music altogether. Later in the album, you've got the song Tangled Up in You, which I have seen being quoted numerous times online. However, I have never really seen anyone talk about the song itself, or the music surrounding it. This just further enforces my point of the music being reduced to background noise on this record. Now, I will admit that near the end of the record there are some hidden gems, like Rainy Day Parade and Nothing Left to Say, which actually is a pretty decent album closer. However, at this point it's already way too late. You can't have about 4 noteworthy tracks on an album that's 57 minutes long. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if these songs are actually all that good, or if they just seem that much better because of how uneventful the rest of the album is. I want to stress again that overall this is not a bad album, but it just feels like Stained light. It sounds like a band trying to imitate Stained, pretty poorly at times. There is nothing that would make you want to go back to this record, even as a Stained fan, which I am myself. There is no reason why I would listen to The Illusion of Progress instead of anything else the band has put out, as I would be getting the same thing and more. This album simply does not have anything to grab your attention. It plays it safe, doesn't take risks, and sticks to the same formula for 57 straight minutes. In conclusion, the reasons why this album has gone on to be forgotten are pretty clear. It was released in a time when Stained's popularity already was past its peak, with people getting bored of their sound. And it definitely did not help that the album itself was nothing special and did nothing to evolve their music even a bit. In fact, it was just a worse version of things the band had done so well before. Lastly, this album could have really done with more inspiration. I simply don't feel like as much heart went into the making of this record compared to other Stained albums. Thank God for the 2011 self-titled album, which is probably my second favorite Stained record. If The Illusion of Progress would have been the last Stained album, their discography would have ended on a pretty sour note. But yeah, that's the story of the forgotten Stained album. It's not bad, just very bland and characterless. But I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Remember to drop a like and leave a comment below. I always love reading the comments. My name is F.A.D. and I will see you guys next time. Bye.